I never thought I'd cry in the parking lot of a strip mall on our wedding anniversary. But there I was, staring at the red taillights of my husband's car as they shrank into the distance, leaving me standing in heels I wore just for him, clutching a reservation confirmation in one hand and a lump of disbelief in my throat. It was our 10th anniversary. We'd made it through a decade. That's supposed to mean something, right? 10 years of being his ride or die, of cooking his meals, managing his parents' birthdays, editing his resume during every layoff, and shrinking myself just enough to keep the peace in rooms where his ego sucked all the air. But the real kicker? He forgot it was our anniversary. I'd reminded him 3 times this week. I put a calendar notification on his phone. I emailed him a screenshot of the reservation I made at the place where we had our first real date. I even got him a tailored jacket to wear, because God forbid a grown man learn his own size. He picked me up late. He was distracted, tapping away at his phone the entire ride. "You look nice," he muttered, eyes on traffic. "Thanks." "So do you," I said. I meant it. He looked good when he tried. I wish I could have appreciated it more in the moment. We pulled into the parking lot behind the restaurant, and I reached into my purse to grab the reservation code. When I looked up, the driver's side door was already open. He was stepping out mid-phone call. "No," I said, liquidate the shares before the quarterly drop. "Listen, I'm not walking into another F*** and meeting with Tom blindsided." He didn't even glance at me, just kept walking toward the sidewalk while barking into his phone. I sat there in the passenger seat, waiting. I thought, maybe he just needed a second. Maybe he'd wave me over. Maybe he'd open the door for me once he realized. He didn't. I stepped out and started to follow. I was halfway to the restaurant when he turned around, looking annoyed. "What are you doing?" I blinked. "Going inside?" He sighed like I was the one inconveniencing him. "I'm gonna have to take this from the car. It's important." My mouth went dry. "We have a reservation. It's our anniversary." He just stared at me like I brought up trash pickup day instead of the single most significant day on our calendar. "I'll just be a minute," he said. "Go inside if you want." And then he turned, walked away, got back in the car, shut the door. I stood there in the humid July dusk, completely overdressed and underloved, watching the man I gave my 20s to choose a phone call over a moment. Again, I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for a couple to walk past and give me that polite "you okay?" smile. I wasn't, but I smiled back anyway. Eventually I turned around and walked back to the car. Not his. Mine. The backup car I parked around the corner earlier that day just in case. 'Cause you see, this wasn't the first time. It was just the last. I didn't go home that night. I didn't go into the restaurant either. I sat in my car, watching through the rearview mirror as he paced around on his phone, probably trying to prove to some junior analyst that he was the smartest man alive. And in that moment, right there in the glow of the parking lot street lamp, I stopped loving him. It didn't come with fireworks or tears. It was quiet, like a candle going out in a room I hadn't realized was cold. The truth was, I'd been holding it all together for years. I had an entire second life hidden behind polite smiles and shared bank accounts. A spreadsheet on my private Google Drive labeled ski trip budget, which was actually a detailed breakdown of our assets. A second credit card in my name only. A locked file cabinet in my office filled with printed statements, photocopies of deeds, prenup clauses he never bothered to reread. Because I'd learned something over the years. When you're married to a narcissist, love doesn't protect you, leverage does. So I went to a hotel, checked in under a name I hadn't used since college, sat on the clean, impersonal bed and pulled out my laptop. Step 1, secure my funds. Most of our money was technically shared. But I'd been quietly diverting 10% of every deposit into a high-yield savings account with my name only. It wasn't much, yet, but it was enough for flight tickets, lawyers, and a soft landing. Next, I froze the joint accounts. Not drained. Froze. That part is important. I wasn't going to be the villain in my own story. I just wanted time, clarity, leverage. Our bank allowed emergency freezes online. I filed it under suspicious activity, which frankly wasn't a lie. Step 2. Talk to someone who wasn't him. I called my sister. Now, my sister isn't the warmest person in the world, but she's the one who helped me get my first job out of college. She's the one who lent me $1,200 for my car down payment when my now husband said we shouldn't stretch the budget. I told her what happened. I didn't cry. I just laid it out. There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "Do you want to come here or do you want to go somewhere else?" "Somewhere else," I said without hesitation. "Good," she said, "because I just texted you my Amex points. Fly somewhere stupid. Somewhere that smells like money and feels like revenge." We both laughed. And just like that, I had a ticket booked. First class. One way. Paris. Step 3. The message. The message wasn't a dramatic text. It wasn't a breakup letter. It wasn't "we need to talk." It was a screenshot of the frozen bank accounts with a short caption. "You left me in a parking lot. I left you in your consequences." I sent it while he was asleep. Then I turned off my phone. At the gate the next morning, boarding group 1 was already lining up when I took off my wedding ring. Not in anger. Not dramatically. Just gently. Like taking off an old coat that no longer fit. I slid it into a velvet pouch and handed it to the gate agent. "Can I recycle this with your baggage?" I said, smiling. She blinked. Sure." I didn't look back. I stepped onto the plane, sank into the plush leather seat, ordered champagne, and watched the world shrink below me through the oval window. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. And I wasn't running. I was arriving. Paris doesn't ask why you're crying into a €9 espresso at 8 a.m. It doesn't flinch when you show up in designer sunglasses with yesterday's makeup still smudged under your eyes. Just accepts you. Quietly. Elegantly. Like the city has seen women like you before. Because it has. I checked into a boutique hotel in the 6th arrondissement. A place so effortlessly chic it made heartbreak feel curated. The kind of place with fresh tulips in the lobby and staff who call you madam even when your voice shakes. The concierge brought up my bags and didn't blink at my lack of wedding ring or my slightly puffy eyes. He simply bowed and said, "You are home, madam." And for the first time in a decade, I believed it. Day 1 I slept. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just slept. Not the restless kind you get when your life is burning down, but the deep, dreamless kind your soul gives you when it's trying to come back online. Day 2 I wandered. No plans. No husband checking his phone. No schedules. Just me, a croissant, and a pair of oversized sunglasses I bought from a street vendor who told me I looked like a famous American divorcee. I didn't correct him. Day 3. I started writing again. Not professionally, God no. Just for myself. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started dumping everything. Memories. Arguments. Things I'd let go of. Things I should have said. The slow erosion of self that happens when you love someone who loves their own reflection more than your soul. Felt like bleeding out poison. Day 4 he found me. Not literally. But he texted. "Did you really freeze everything? This is immature." I stared at the message. Then laughed. Loudly. Alone on a rooftop bar, sipping something with elderflower in it. The bartender raised a brow. I just waved the phone and said, "A ghost from my old life. We need to talk. You're being dramatic." I had a work emergency. That was his version of accountability, recasting my pain as performance. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new message thread with my attorney. Well, the one I've been consulting quietly for the past 6 months. Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Women often plan their exits long before they physically leave. I'd been collecting screenshots, logging dates, keeping quiet, smiling, pretending. And now, every bit of that emotional labor had transformed into a paper trail of escape. That night, I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. I didn't even ask what it was. I just pointed and said, "Yes." When the waiter brought it, I took one bite and burst into tears. Not because it was bad, but because it was the first time I'd tasted something without asking myself whether he would like it. Day 6. I met someone. Not like that. Not yet. She was an older woman, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair and red lipstick and the kind of presence that made people sit up straighter. She sat next to me at a bookstore cafe, reading a French novel I pretended to recognize. She glanced at me and said, in perfect English, "You look like someone who just closed a very important door." I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" She smiled. "Only to someone who once slammed the same kind." Her name was Elise. She had been married to a very powerful, very charming, very poisonous man once. She didn't offer advice. Just stories. Tiny, brutal, sparkling stories of the woman she had been, and the one she became. Before we parted, she leaned in and whispered, "The best revenge isn't success. It's indifference. Live a life so rich in color that they fade to grayscale." I didn't even know I needed to hear that until I did. By the end of the first week, I wasn't healed. Not completely. But I was remembering the shape of myself. What I liked. What I didn't. How I dressed when no one else's opinions colored the edges. How I laughed when I wasn't performing safety for someone volatile. I was still bruised. But I was also blooming. And as I stood on the balcony of my hotel that evening, watching the lights flicker on across the city, I said something out loud for the first time. He lost me. Not I left him. Not we didn't work out. He lost me because he thought I was permanent. Furniture. Forgiveness on demand. But I wasn't. I was a woman. With edges. With escape plans. With a boarding pass that didn't include him. The thing about men like him, they never believe you'll follow through. They think your silence is submission. Your grace is weakness. Your "I'm fine" is real. They don't realize it's data collection. I returned to the States 2 weeks after Paris. Calm. Composed. Legally prepared. He expected an explosion. I gave him velvet gloves and a lawyer with a binder. We met at a neutral office. Not ours. Not his. My attorney's. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because I wanted to choose the seat with the best lighting and view of the exit. I wore navy. No jewelry. Wedding ring long gone. My hair pulled back not for style but for focus. He walked in exactly on time like always. Always punctual. Always performative. He looked confused. Not at the legal documents on the table but at me. I wasn't crying. I wasn't accusing. I wasn't begging. I was done. "You're being dramatic," he said. My lawyer slid the first folder across the table without looking up. Inside. A perfectly indexed summary of our finances, assets, prenup clauses, and most importantly, his violations. Financial neglect. Emotional abandonment. Paper trails of him draining joint funds into personal crypto accounts without disclosure. He blinked at the pages. "You hired someone?" I smiled. "You trained me." He scoffed. "So what, you're leaving with my money?" "No," I said softly. "I'm leaving with mine. You just didn't notice it was never yours to begin with." Here's the thing. I hadn't planned to destroy him. I had planned to exit with elegance. But narcissists don't negotiate, they escalate. He called my calm cold, my preparation manipulative, my silence punishment. I didn't respond to insults. I responded with paper. When he threatened to fight for the house, the one I bought before we married, I simply pulled out the deed. My name. My down payment. My dated receipt from before he even proposed. When he said, You'll regret making this ugly, I said, then stopped decorating it. He didn't expect me to have documentation. He didn't expect me to be 10 moves ahead. He didn't expect a woman who stopped needing his permission to breathe. I didn't take everything. I didn't need to. I left him with the things he valued most, his ego and his reputation. And in return, I took the freedom he never offered me in marriage. The car in my name. The condo I'd quietly inherited from my aunt last year. The retirement account he never asked about because it wasn't sexy. My time. My clarity. My damn last name. People think divorce is loud. Screaming. Drama. Police calls. But the most powerful divorces are quiet. Surgical. The kind where you don't burn bridges. You fold them neatly and walk away barefoot, never looking back. After the papers were signed, he stood in the hallway as I put my coat on. He looked smaller. Not sad. Just surprised. Is this really it? He asked. No, I said, buttoning the top clasp. This was it 2 years ago. You're just late to the ending. And with that, I walked past him down the hallway and out into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in 10 years. That night, I opened a bottle of champagne. Alone. No toasts. No audience. Just a long, slow exhale. I didn't feel victorious. I felt vacant. Like someone who had just performed surgery on herself with no anesthesia. But beneath the vacancy, something else stirred. Space. Not the aching kind. The fertile kind. The kind that lets light in. The months after the divorce weren't glamorous. They weren't Instagrammable, aesthetic, or effortless. They were quiet, lonely, and incredibly honest. Because once the dust settled, once the bank accounts were divided, the house keys handed back, and the name on my driver's license reverted, I was left with something I hadn't held in years. Myself. Not the version of me who curated her tone to match his moods. Not the one who counted calories, counted her words, and counted how many more compromises she could make before vanishing. Just me. Raw. Scraped down. Rebuilding. I started with small things. Buying the expensive oat milk without checking the price. Playing music out loud in the kitchen, my music. 90s R&B and French jazz and women with voices that sounded like mine. Bruised but unbroken. Repainting the walls of my new apartment without asking, "Do you like this color?" Lighting candles for no reason. Reading books with no clear purpose. Sleeping on both sides of the bed just because I could. Didn't feel like healing. Felt like remembering. I tried dating. Once. A friend set me up with someone normal, which apparently meant polite and emotionally available. We met for coffee. He was kind, interesting, and deeply into artisanal honey. But halfway through his story about a beekeeping retreat in Vermont, I felt this wave of grief, not because of him, but because I realized I had no idea who I was in a room with a man who wasn't a threat. It wasn't his fault. It was mine. For surviving so long, I'd forgotten how to live. So I stopped trying to date. I started dating myself instead. I took myself out for dinners with cloth napkins and waiters who said, "Just one tonight?" "Yes," I'd say. "Just me." And that's more than enough. I traveled, small weekend trips, nothing flashy. I walked barefoot on beaches, slept in high thread count linens, and ate dessert first. I started therapy. Not the healing him through me kind. The real kind. Where I learned that I had been in survival mode for years, mistaking endurance for devotion, loyalty for self-erasure. My therapist asked me once, "What do you need from the next chapter of your life?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Silence that doesn't feel like punishment, and space that feels like possibility." She smiled. "That's not a next chapter. That's a new book." A few months later, I opened a new business account. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet little LLC under my own name. A brand consultancy, but on my terms this time. I no longer needed anyone's approval to be good at what I did. I had credentials. I had receipts. I had clients who trusted my gut because I trusted it again. One afternoon, while updating the website, I looked at my bio and realized something wild. I hadn't mentioned him. Not wife of, not formerly married to, not even divorced. He didn't exist in this version of my story. And not because I'd erased him, because he no longer defined me. I don't hate him. I don't miss him either. He was a chapter, a cautionary tale, a necessary wound. But now, I don't look at love through the lens of scarcity. I don't confuse being chosen with being cherished. And most importantly, I no longer wait in parking lots. It's been a year now, a full orbit around the sun since that night. He left me stranded between heartbreak and clarity. Every anniversary since has belonged to me. I celebrate them quietly. I book a first-class ticket somewhere new each July. I order the nicest thing on the menu, toast to myself, and smile at the woman in the reflection. She's not perfect, but she's free. And that's the real luxury. It happened on a Tuesday. A completely ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday. I had just finished a client call, still wearing pajama pants under a blazer, when my phone lit up. His name. I stared at the screen like it was an old photograph, familiar but no longer mine. It had been 18 months. No contact. No slip-ups. No accidental sightings. I had changed numbers, emails, addresses. But one thing remained. The same WhatsApp account, dormant but untouched. I don't know why. Maybe because deep down I knew one day he'd try. I let the call ring out. Then a message followed. Just one line. Do you ever think about us? I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Not out of fear. But because there was nothing left to say. He wasn't asking about us. He was reaching for the version of me that once stayed too long. The one who cried in bathrooms and made excuses for his absence. The one who would have read that message and spiraled. But she didn't live here anymore. An hour later he tried again. I saw your site. You look good. I'm happy for you. I could almost hear the pause after good. Like it hurt to say it. Like he never imagined I'd glow without him. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the parking lot. Just the subtle manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. Classic. I keep thinking about how we used to laugh. Remember Maui? Remember that night in the rain? I remembered. I remembered the laughter, sure. But I also remembered the exhaustion. The loneliness in hotel rooms he never fully entered. The way he always filmed sunsets but never looked me in the eye when I said, I need more. And so I replied, not for him. For me. I do remember Maui. I remember crying in the bathroom because you called me too sensitive when I asked for a hug. I remember watching you laugh at your phone while I packed our bags. I remember waiting for you to see me. But I don't live in memory anymore. I live in peace. Please don't contact me again. I hit send. Then I blocked him. Not out of anger. Out of finality. That night I poured a glass of wine and sat barefoot on my balcony. No makeup, no curated lighting, just me and the quiet. There was no thrill in shutting the door. No triumphant score playing in the background. Just stillness. And stillness, I've learned, is its own kind of power. I'm not going to tell you that healing made me invincible. That would be a lie. Some nights I still feel the ache of all the years I lost to self-erasure. Sometimes I flinch when someone raises their voice. Sometimes I second-guess if I'm too much for taking up space. But the difference now, I stay. With myself. With the discomfort. With the freedom. Because I earned every inch of this new life. Not with revenge. Not with rage. But with quiet, consistent, inconvenient self-respect. So no, I don't think about us. I think about the woman I've become. I think about how she rebuilt from rubble, in silence with spreadsheets and stilettos. How she learned to stop performing worthiness. How she made Paris her therapist, the law her ally, and freedom her love language. I think about how she never waited in a parking lot again. And that, my friends, is the story of luxury revenge, of emotional clarity, of one woman's quiet, elegant escape from narcissistic erosion. Not fiction, not fantasy, just the truth. And maybe if it sounds a little like your story too, then you already know what to do next.